My true story from California. My son said all I did was eat without contributing anything meaningful to the household. Those words cut through my heart like a knife. For 5 long years, my own son told me that all I did was eat without contributing anything meaningful to the household. But those cruel words also opened my eyes to a truth I had been avoiding for far too long, that I was being abused in my own home by the person I loved most in this world. Welcome back to Granny Dorothy's Stories. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel. Your support truly encourages me to continue sharing these incredible tales with you. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I love hearing from my sweethearts around the world. My name is Rose, I'm 68 years old, and I live here in Sacramento, California. People who know me today see a woman who owns her own small home, tends her garden, and lives peacefully on her own terms. They can't imagine the hell I lived through for 5 years, or how I finally found the courage to take back control of my life in a way that shocked everyone, including myself. Before I continue this difficult story, tell me in the comments what your name is and where you're listening from. I want to know who these brave souls are who have the courage to hear the raw truth about what can happen behind closed doors, even in families that look perfectly normal from the outside. This story isn't for everyone. It's about a mother who learned the hardest way possible that love without boundaries becomes a weapon in the wrong hands. But I'm telling it because I know there are other women out there who might be living what I lived through. Maybe my courage will give them the strength to see that they deserve better too. Every word I speak here is true. Every detail actually happened. And if you stay until the end, you'll understand why sometimes the quietest actions speak the loudest when it comes to taking back your power. My life wasn't always about walking on eggshells in my own home. I worked as a nurse here in Sacramento for over 30 years, helping patients, caring for families, being the compassionate voice people heard when they were at their most vulnerable. I was proud of my work, proud of the difference I made in people's lives during their darkest hours. I started working at Sacramento General Hospital right out of nursing school when I was just 22 years old. Back then, the hospital was smaller, more like a family. We knew every patient's name, their families, their stories. I worked the day shift in the medical ward, taking care of people recovering from surgeries, managing chronic illnesses, and helping elderly patients who reminded me of my own grandmother. The work was hard but rewarding. 12-hour shifts on your feet, dealing with pain and fear and sometimes death. But there was nothing like the feeling of helping someone heal, of being there when they needed comfort most. My supervisors always said I had a gift for making patients feel safe and cared for. I took pride in that. Michael's father left us when Michael was just 3 years old. His name was David, and he was a maintenance worker at the hospital where I worked. We met when he came to fix a broken air conditioning unit in our ward. He was charming, funny, and he pursued me with flowers and sweet notes left at the nurse's station. We dated for 2 years before I got pregnant. When I told David about the baby, his whole attitude changed overnight. He said he couldn't handle the responsibility anymore, that he needed to find himself, that he was too young to be tied down with a family. He disappeared one weekend and never came back. I heard through mutual friends that he had moved to Oregon and started a new life there. I was heartbroken, but I was determined that my boy would never feel that abandonment. I promised myself that Michael would grow up knowing he was wanted, that he would have everything he needed to become a good man. I worked extra shifts whenever I could, saved every penny for his future, and made sure he never lacked for attention or affection. Raising a child alone while working as a nurse was exhausting. I would work my 12-hour shift at the hospital, pick Michael up from daycare, come home and make dinner, help with homework, give him a bath, read him stories, and then fall into bed only to get up and do it all again the next day. Weekends were for grocery shopping, laundry, cleaning the house, and trying to give Michael the childhood experiences I wanted him to have. I remember taking him to the park every Saturday morning, pushing him on the swings until my arms ached, watching him play with other children and feeling proud of what a social, happy little boy he was. I would pack picnic lunches and we would sit on a blanket under the oak trees, sharing sandwiches and talking about his week at school. Michael was an easy child in many ways. He was affectionate, smart, and curious about everything. He loved to help me in the kitchen, standing on a little stool to reach the counter, stirring ingredients while I prepared our dinner. He would tell me about his day at school, what he learned, which kids he played with at recess. Those conversations were the highlight of my day. But even from a young age, I noticed that Michael had a way of getting what he wanted. If I said no to something, he would find different ways to ask until I eventually gave in. If I was tired and didn't want to play a game, he would sit next to me and stroke my arm and tell me how much he loved spending time with me until I couldn't resist. I thought it showed that he was smart and persistent, qualities that would serve him well in life. Looking back now, I think it was precisely this endless giving that taught him to take everything for granted. I never asked him to contribute to household chores beyond the basics. I never made him get a part-time job in high school like other kids. I wanted his only job to be succeeding in school and being happy. I thought I was being a good mother, but maybe I was creating a man who believed the world owed him everything. As Michael grew older, that charm and persistence started to feel different. In elementary school, his teachers always spoke well of him at parent conferences. They said he was polite, helpful, and good with other children. But I started noticing that he had a way of manipulating situations to his advantage. When he didn't want to do his homework, he would suddenly develop a headache or stomachache. When I took him to the doctor, nothing was ever wrong, but he had successfully avoided the work. When he wanted something I couldn't afford, he would compare our situation to his friends' families, making me feel guilty that I couldn't provide the same luxuries. In middle school, Michael discovered that he could play adults against each other. If I said no to something, he would ask my mother, his grandmother, who lived just a few blocks away. She adored him and often said yes to things I had refused. When I confronted him about this, he would act innocent and say he forgot that I had already said no. High school brought new challenges. Michael was popular, played on the baseball team, and had a girlfriend named Sarah who seemed like a sweet girl. But I noticed that when things didn't go his way, he had a temper that came out in subtle ways. He would become cold and distant, giving me the silent treatment until I asked what was wrong and worked to make things right. When his baseball team lost an important game, he came home and slammed doors, threw his equipment bag across his room, and complained that the coach was unfair and the other players were lazy. Nothing was ever his fault. There was always someone else to blame when things went wrong. His relationship with Sarah ended during his senior year, and Michael's version of the story painted her as the villain. He said she was jealous of his friendships with other people, that she was too demanding, that she didn't understand how much pressure he was under with school and baseball. But I ran into Sarah's mother at the grocery store a few weeks later, and she had a very different story. She told me that Sarah had broken up with Michael because he was becoming controlling and possessive. He didn't like her spending time with her girlfriends, questioned her about where she went and who she talked to, and got angry when she didn't immediately return his phone calls. Sarah's mother said her daughter felt like she was walking on eggshells around him. I was shocked by this description because it didn't match the Michael I knew at home. With me, he was still charming and affectionate, though I had noticed that his affection came with expectations. If I was tired after a long shift and didn't want to cook his favorite dinner, he would hug me and tell me how much he appreciated everything I did for him, and somehow I would find myself in the kitchen making exactly what he wanted. After high school, Michael enrolled in community college to study business, but his heart didn't seem to be in it. He complained that the classes were boring, that the other students were immature, that the professors didn't understand real-world applications. After 1 year, he dropped out, saying college was a waste of time and money. I was disappointed about college, But Michael had a convincing argument about hands-on experience being more valuable than classroom learning. He got a job at an electronics store in the mall, selling phones and computers to customers. The job seemed perfect for him because he was good with people and understood technology well. For the first year after dropping out, Michael lived in a small apartment near the mall with a roommate. He seemed to be doing well, earning decent money and enjoying his independence. He would come over for dinner once or twice a week, bringing his laundry and stories about difficult customers or workplace drama. But gradually, I started noticing changes in how he talked about other people. His roommate was messy and inconsiderate. His manager at work was incompetent and played favorites. His co-workers were lazy and tried to take credit for his sales. Everyone in Michael's world seemed to be a problem except Michael himself. When his roommate moved out and Michael couldn't afford the apartment alone, he asked if he could move back home temporarily while he looked for something cheaper. I said yes immediately, happy to have my son back under my roof and excited about the opportunity to spend more time with him. That decision changed everything in my life, though it took me months to realize just how much. When Michael moved back home at age 21, I thought it would be like having my sweet boy back again. For the first few weeks, it was wonderful. He helped with groceries, took over the heavier household tasks, and even cooked dinner a few times when I had worked a particularly difficult shift at the hospital. But slowly, his helpfulness came with comments that made me uncomfortable. When he did the grocery shopping, he would ask why I bought certain items, suggesting that my choices were wasteful or impractical. When he cooked dinner, he would comment that I used too many ingredients for simple meals, that his way was more efficient. The criticism was so subtle at first that I questioned whether I was being oversensitive. Michael would frame his comments as helpful suggestions or expressions of concern for my well-being. He said he was worried that I was working too hard, spending too much money, making decisions without thinking them through carefully. When I turned 60 and started talking seriously about retirement, Michael became very interested in my financial situation. He asked detailed questions about my retirement savings, my pension from the hospital, how much money I would need each month to live comfortably. He said he was just concerned about my security, that he wanted to make sure I would be able to enjoy my retirement years. I was touched by his apparent concern, so I shared my financial information with him. I had been careful about saving money throughout my career, putting aside a portion of every paycheck into retirement accounts. I owned my house outright, having paid off the mortgage just 2 years earlier. I felt secure about my financial future. But Michael immediately found problems with my retirement plans. He said the house was too big for me to maintain alone, that the neighborhood was changing and becoming less safe, that I wouldn't be able to handle emergencies or repairs by myself. He painted such a convincing picture of the challenges I would face that I started to doubt my own capabilities. He suggested that I might be happier in a smaller place, maybe a senior community where maintenance and security were handled by management. When I resisted the idea, he said he understood my attachment to the house but that I needed to be practical about my limitations as I got older. Then he made his proposal. He said he would stay in the house with me permanently, taking care of maintenance and helping me with anything I couldn't handle alone. In exchange, I wouldn't charge him rent, and he would gradually take over more household responsibilities as I aged. He presented it as a mutually beneficial arrangement that would give me security and him an affordable place to live. I was moved by what seemed like thoughtful planning for our future together. Here was my son, offering to sacrifice his independence to ensure my safety and comfort. How many women would be blessed with such a devoted child? I agreed immediately, grateful to have someone who cared so much about my well-being. That decision was the beginning of the end of my independence, though I didn't recognize it at the time. Within months of our new arrangement, Michael began taking control of decisions that had always been mine to make. He said I was getting forgetful and needed his guidance to avoid making mistakes. When I couldn't remember where I had put my reading glasses or forgot to turn off the coffee maker one morning, he used these small incidents as evidence that my memory was declining. He convinced me to add his name to my checking account so he could help pay bills and manage household expenses. He said it would be more efficient than trying to coordinate everything separately, and that it would be helpful if I ever became too confused or sick to handle financial matters myself. Once his name was on the account, Michael began monitoring every purchase I made. If I bought a book or a small gift for a friend, he would ask why I was spending money on unnecessary items. If I went out to lunch with co-workers, he would comment that restaurant meals were expensive and that I could save money by eating at home. The psychological manipulation was gradual but relentless. Michael would tell me that my memory was getting worse, that I was becoming confused about simple things, that people were starting to notice my decline. He made me doubt my own perceptions and capabilities until I started to believe that maybe I really was becoming incompetent. When neighbors or friends from work called to make plans, Michael would often answer the phone. He would explain that I was having a difficult day, that I was becoming more confused and forgetful, that it was better not to disturb me when I was struggling. Gradually, people stopped calling. They thought they were being considerate of my declining condition. If you've ever felt like you were losing yourself in your own life, you'll understand what was happening to me. Every day, Michael chipped away at my confidence and independence until I started to believe that I couldn't function without his help and guidance. What began as financial oversight gradually expanded into complete domination of every aspect of my life. Michael convinced me that I needed more help managing my affairs, that my confusion was getting worse, and that legal protections needed to be put in place in case I became unable to make decisions for myself. He researched power of attorney documents and presented them to me as a necessary precaution. He explained that if I ever had a medical emergency or became too confused to handle my own affairs, having these legal documents would make it possible for him to take care of everything without delays or complications. The paperwork looked official and legitimate. Michael had even gotten it notarized, which made it seem more trustworthy. He walked me through each section, explaining what it meant and why it was important. I signed the documents believing that I was being responsible and protecting both of us from future difficulties. With that power of attorney in place, Michael began making decisions without consulting me at all. He changed my will without my knowledge, making himself the sole beneficiary. He consolidated my savings accounts and moved money into accounts that he controlled. When I questioned these changes, he showed me documents and explained that these moves were necessary for tax purposes and better estate planning. Michael also started telling me that I was developing early signs of dementia. He said he had been researching my symptoms online and that all the signs pointed to cognitive decline. He printed out articles about dementia and Alzheimer's disease, highlighting symptoms that he claimed to have observed in my behavior. When I insisted that my mind was still sharp, he would point out small mistakes I had made, forgetting where I put my purse, calling my neighbor by the wrong name, or getting confused about what day of the week it was. These normal signs of aging or stress became evidence of serious mental decline in his interpretation. The isolation became systematic and complete. Michael convinced me that going out was dangerous because I might get confused and lost. He said my reflexes were slowing down and that driving was too risky. He took my car keys away for my own safety, promising to drive me anywhere I needed to go. But when I asked him to take me to visit friends or attend church activities, he always had reasons why it wasn't a good idea. I looked tired and should rest instead. The weather was bad for someone with my health concerns. I had seemed confused earlier in the day and probably shouldn't be around other people until I felt better. My friends from work and church stopped visiting because Michael told them I was having episodes of confusion and aggression. He said that visitors tended to agitate me and make my condition worse. He was so convincing that people believed they were being kind by staying away and giving me space to deal with my illness. Michael monitored my phone calls, claiming he needed to protect me from scammers who prey on elderly people with memory problems. He installed caller ID and call blocking on our phone, saying it would filter out suspicious calls. In reality, it gave him control over who could reach me and what conversations I could have. When someone called asking questions about my health or trying to invite me somewhere, he would use it as evidence that I was too vulnerable to handle communications independently. He would answer the phone for me and explain that I was having a bad day or that the doctor had recommended limiting my social interactions. The emotional abuse became constant and devastating. Michael told me that I had become a burden to everyone who knew me. He said my friends were relieved they didn't have to pretend to enjoy my company anymore, that my confusion made conversations difficult, and that people felt sorry for me more than anything else. He controlled what I ate, claiming that my dietary choices were contributing to my mental decline. He prepared all my meals and gave me supplements that he said would help with brain function and memory. I often felt drowsy and confused after taking these vitamins, but Michael explained that this was a normal part of aging and brain deterioration. When I tried to assert myself in small ways, wanting to choose my own clothes, expressing preferences about meals, or asking to call a friend, Michael would become cold and distant. He would remind me how much he was sacrificing to take care of me, how other adult children put their parents in nursing homes rather than dealing with the constant challenges of caregiving. He painted vivid pictures of what would happen to me if he decided he could no longer handle my care. He described nursing homes as warehouses for confused elderly people, places where overworked staff ignored residents and families never visited. He said that because I had no other family and my friends had already given up on me, I would die alone and be forgotten if he abandoned me. The threats became more explicit and frightening. Michael said that if I continued to be difficult and uncooperative, he might have to have me evaluated by doctors for placement in a memory care facility. He said that my increasingly erratic behavior was becoming dangerous, both to myself and potentially to others. Any woman who has felt trapped in her own life will recognize the desperation that builds when every day brings the same humiliation and loss of control. What made it worse was knowing that from the outside, our situation looked admirable. Michael had built a perfect image as the devoted son sacrificing his own life to care for his declining mother. Neighbors praised him for his dedication when they saw him helping me to the car for doctor's appointments. The postal worker commented on what a good son he was, always looking out for his mother's well-being. When we encountered acquaintances at the grocery store, they would tell me how lucky I was to have such a caring child. This public image made it impossible for me to ask for help. Who would believe that the man everyone admired was systematically destroying my independence and self-worth? If I tried to tell anyone what was really happening, it would sound like the confused complaints of an elderly woman who didn't appreciate her son's sacrifices. But then came the moment that changed everything. It was a moment of clarity that broke through years of manipulation and self-doubt. The moment that changed everything happened on a quiet Tuesday afternoon in March. I was sitting in the living room, looking through some old photo albums while Michael was at work. It had been months since I had taken the time to look at these pictures, and Michael usually discouraged me from dwelling on the past, saying it made me melancholy and confused. But that afternoon, something drew me to the albums tucked away on the bottom shelf of our bookcase. As I turned the pages slowly, seeing pictures of family gatherings, holidays, and celebrations from years past, something inside me began to shift and awaken. I saw photographs of myself from just 5 years earlier. In these pictures, I looked confident, well-dressed, surrounded by friends at church events and work celebrations. I was laughing, engaged in conversations, clearly comfortable and happy in my own skin. The woman in those photographs bore little resemblance to the person I had become. There were pictures of me at my retirement party from the hospital, surrounded by colleagues who had worked with me for decades. I was holding a beautiful cake decorated with medical symbols and well wishes. My face was glowing with pride and excitement about the future. I remembered that day clearly, how honored I felt by the speeches my co-workers gave, how optimistic I was about the adventures retirement would bring. I found photos of myself tending the garden that I used to love so much. I was kneeling among the tomato plants, my hands dirty from working in the soil, my face radiant with the satisfaction of growing something beautiful and useful. When was the last time I had been in that garden? Michael had convinced me that the physical work was too strenuous for someone my age, that I might fall or injure myself working alone outside. There were pictures of me with friends from church, women I had known for years who used to be a regular part of my life. We were dressed up for various events, potluck dinners, holiday celebrations, volunteer activities. I remembered how much I enjoyed those friendships, how we supported each other through difficult times and celebrated each other's joys. As I continued looking through the albums, I realized that all these activities, all these relationships, all these sources of joy and purpose in my life had disappeared. And they had disappeared so gradually that I hadn't even noticed their absence until I saw the evidence of what my life used to be. That afternoon, I did something I hadn't done in months. I walked to the kitchen drawer where I used to keep important documents. Michael had told me he moved everything to a safer location for organization purposes, but I remembered hiding one folder behind some old recipe cards, just in case I ever needed to access something quickly. The folder was still there, dusty and forgotten. Inside were copies of my original will, bank statements from before Michael took control of my finances, and most importantly, the deed to my house. As I read through these documents, I began to understand the full extent of what had been taken from me. My original will had been balanced and thoughtful. I had left portions of my estate to my church, to a scholarship fund at the nursing school where I had trained, and to Michael. The new will Michael had prepared left everything solely to him, with no acknowledgement of the charities and causes that had been important to me throughout my life. My savings accounts, which had contained over $60,000 when Michael moved in, now showed balances of less than $5,000. Money I had saved through 30 years of careful budgeting and sacrifice had disappeared into accounts that I no longer controlled. But the deed to the house was still in my name only. Despite everything else he had managed to control or change, this document remained unchanged. For the first time in years, I felt a spark of my old strength returning. I owned this house. I had worked 30 years to pay for it. And nobody, not even my son, had the right to make me feel like a prisoner in my own home. I spent the rest of that afternoon reading through all the documents carefully, trying to understand exactly what my financial situation really was versus what Michael had told me. I realized that while he had gained control over most of my liquid assets, there were still resources available to me if I chose to use them. That evening, when Michael came home and started his usual routine of criticism and control, something was different in how I heard his words. Instead of feeling hurt and diminished, I felt angry. When he told me that all I did was eat without contributing anything meaningful to the household, instead of accepting the guilt and shame he intended, I suddenly understood what was happening. He had turned our relationship completely upside down. I was the homeowner. I was the one who had saved for retirement. I was the one who had worked and sacrificed for decades. Yet somehow, he had convinced me that I was the dependent one, the burden, the one who should be grateful for his presence. For the first time in years, I saw the situation clearly. Michael wasn't taking care of me. He was using me. He had systematically isolated me from my support systems, controlled my resources, and convinced me that I was incompetent so that he could maintain his comfortable lifestyle without having to support himself independently. That night, I lay in bed making a decision that would have been unthinkable just days before. I was going to take back control of my life, and I was going to do it in a way that would make it impossible for Michael to manipulate or stop me. The next morning, after Michael left for work, I did something that would have been unthinkable just days before. I called a taxi and asked the driver to take me to a real estate office in downtown Sacramento. My hands were shaking as I gave the address, and I felt like I was doing something dangerous and forbidden. The taxi driver was a kind older gentleman who helped me out of the car and asked if I needed him to wait. I told him no, that I wasn't sure how long I would be, but I thanked him for his concern. Walking into that real estate office felt like the first independent decision I had made in years. The real estate agent, Mrs. Patterson, was a professional woman about my age who listened carefully as I explained my situation. I told her that I was considering selling my house and moving to something smaller, that my adult son was currently living with me but that our arrangement wasn't working out as planned. Mrs. Patterson asked gentle but probing questions about my goals and timeline. When I explained that I wanted to move quickly and quietly, she nodded with understanding. She said she had worked with other women in similar situations and knew how to handle transactions with discretion and efficiency. She asked about the condition of the house, its approximate age and square footage, and the neighborhood. When I described my home, a 3-bedroom ranch-style house in a well-maintained neighborhood with mature trees and good schools, her eyes lit up. She said that properties like mine were in high demand and typically sold quickly in the current market. Mrs. Patterson explained the process step by step. She would come to look at the house while Michael was at work, take photographs, and prepare a market analysis. We would discuss pricing strategy and timing. Once we listed the property, she would handle all showings during work hours when Michael wouldn't be home. She also addressed my concerns about keeping the process confidential until the sale was finalized. She said all real estate communications could come to her office rather than to my home. She could arrange for the closing to happen quickly once we had an acceptable offer. Most importantly, she assured me that everything we were doing was completely legal and within my rights as the sole owner of the property. The next day, Mrs. Patterson came to look at the house. I was nervous about having a stranger evaluate my home, but she was respectful and thorough. She complimented the care I had taken with the property over the years. The well-maintained hardwood floors, the updated kitchen, the beautiful garden that I used to tend so carefully. As we walked through each room, she took notes and measurements. She pointed out features that would appeal to potential buyers: the large master bedroom, the spacious living areas, the 2-car garage, the privacy fence around the backyard. She said the house was in excellent condition and would definitely appeal to families looking for a solid, well-cared-for home. Mrs. Patterson's market analysis showed that my house was worth significantly more than I had expected. Real estate values in our neighborhood had increased substantially over the years I had been paying off the mortgage. She recommended listing the property at a price that would generate multiple offers and create a quick sale. We discussed timing carefully. Mrs. Patterson said that if we listed the house on a Thursday, we could have showings over the weekend and potentially have offers by the following week. She recommended accepting the first solid offer we received rather than trying to maximize the sale price, since my goal was speed and certainty rather than getting every possible dollar. During those planning days, I also took care of other important business. I called the bank where Michael and I had the joint checking account and asked about removing his name from the account. The bank representative explained that both parties had to agree to changes in joint accounts, but that I could open a new individual account and transfer my funds there. I opened a new account at a different bank entirely, one where Michael had no access or authority. I arranged for my Social Security and pension payments to be deposited into this new account. For the first time in years, I would have complete control over my own money. I also contacted a lawyer recommended by Mrs. Patterson, someone who specialized in elder law and family issues. Mr. Davidson was a calm, professional man who listened to my story without judgment. He explained that what Michael had been doing was called financial elder abuse, and that it was a serious crime regardless of family relationships. Mr. Davidson helped me understand my legal rights and options. He prepared new documents revoking the power of attorney I had signed, ensuring that Michael would no longer have any legal authority over my affairs. He also helped me understand how to protect my assets and make sure that Michael couldn't interfere with the house sale or my other financial decisions. Most importantly, Mr. Davidson assured me that everything I was planning was completely within my rights. As the sole owner of the house, I had every legal right to sell it without Michael's permission or knowledge. As a competent adult, I had the right to manage my own finances and make my own living arrangements. The house listing went active on a Thursday morning, just as Mrs. Patterson had suggested. By Thursday evening, we had 3 requests for showings scheduled for the weekend. By Sunday night, we had 2 solid offers, both above the asking price. Mrs. Patterson called me Monday morning with the good news. Both offers were from qualified buyers with pre-approved financing. One family had offered exactly the asking price with a quick closing timeline. The other had offered $15,000 over the asking price but wanted a longer closing period. Following Mrs. Patterson's advice, I accepted the higher offer with the condition that we could close within 3 weeks. The buyers agreed immediately. Suddenly, I had a firm sale date and a plan for my future that was entirely my own. During those 3 weeks, I quietly made arrangements for my new life. I found a lovely 2-bedroom apartment in a senior community about 20 miles away, in a different part of California where I could start fresh. The community had security, planned activities, and a strong sense of independence among its residents. The apartment was perfect for my needs: 1 floor, easy maintenance, a small balcony where I could grow herbs and flowers in containers. The monthly rent was reasonable and would allow me to live comfortably on my retirement income. Most importantly, it was a place where I could be myself again, free from criticism and control. I arranged for a moving company to pack and transport my belongings. I decided to take only the furniture and personal items that were truly meaningful to me, leaving behind the things that held too many bad memories. I was looking forward to creating a new environment that reflected who I really was rather than who Michael had convinced me I was. The day before closing, I knew I had to tell Michael what was happening. I had managed to keep the entire process secret for 3 weeks, but soon he would come home to find movers packing our house. It was time for the confrontation I had been both dreading and anticipating. I waited until Michael came home from work on Wednesday evening. I had spent the day mentally preparing for this conversation, knowing that his reaction would be intense and probably ugly. But I felt stronger than I had in years, armed with the knowledge that I had legal protections in place and a plan that he couldn't stop. Michael walked into the house as he always did, expecting dinner to be ready and the house organized for his comfort. Instead, he found me sitting calmly at the kitchen table with a folder of documents in front of me. I told him we needed to talk about something important. He sat down across from me with that familiar look of controlled patience, as if he were humoring a confused elderly woman who wanted to discuss something trivial. I think he expected me to complain about some small household issue that he could easily dismiss or turn around to make me feel guilty about bringing it up. Instead, I looked him directly in the eyes and said, "Michael, I have sold the house. The closing is tomorrow morning, and I will be moving out this weekend." The change in his expression was immediate and dramatic. The patient, condescending mask fell away completely, replaced by shock, then fury, then panic. He stared at me as if I had suddenly spoken in a foreign language. "What are you talking about?" he said, his voice rising. "You can't sell the house. You're not competent to make decisions like that. I have a power of attorney. I'll stop the sale." I had been prepared for this reaction. Calmly, I slid copies of the documents Mr. Davidson had prepared across the table to him. "I revoked your power of attorney 3 weeks ago," I said. "I am the sole owner of this house, and I have every legal right to sell it. The sale is final." Michael's reaction escalated quickly through several stages. First came the threats. He said I was having a mental breakdown, that I wasn't competent to make such major decisions, that he would have the sale stopped because I was clearly not of sound mind. He threatened to have me committed for psychiatric evaluation. I was prepared for these threats too. Mr. Davidson had provided me with documentation proving my mental competency, including letters from my doctor confirming that I was in good health and fully capable of making my own decisions. I showed these documents to Michael and explained that his accusations carried no legal weight. When his threats didn't work, Michael tried guilt and emotional manipulation. He cried and said he had sacrificed everything to take care of me, that he had given up his independence out of love, that I was abandoning him after all he had done for me. He painted himself as the victim of an ungrateful mother who didn't appreciate his devotion. I listened to everything he said, and then I responded with words I had been practicing for weeks. I told him that a son who truly loved his mother would want her to feel safe and valued in her own home. I said that taking away someone's independence and self-worth was not caregiving, it was control and abuse. I explained that I was not abandoning him, I was saving myself from a situation that had become harmful and unhealthy. I told him that he was a capable adult who could and should support himself independently, just like millions of other people his age. The most powerful moment came when I handed him a letter I had written, explaining everything I had discovered about my finances and everything I had felt over the past 5 years. In that letter, I detailed how he had isolated me from friends, controlled my money, convinced me I was incompetent, and made me feel like a burden in my own home. I told him he had 30 days to find new housing arrangements, and that our relationship would need to start over from scratch if it was going to continue at all. I explained that any future contact between us would have to be based on mutual respect and recognition of my independence and autonomy. Michael read the letter, and I watched his face go through a range of emotions: anger, panic, disbelief, and finally a cold calculation that I found deeply disturbing. He looked up at me with an expression I had never seen before, and for a moment I glimpsed the person he really was underneath all the manipulation and false concern. "You'll regret this," he said quietly. "You can't take care of yourself. You'll end up sick and alone with no one to help you. Don't come crying to me when you realize what a mistake you've made." Those words were meant to frighten me, to make me doubt my decision and beg him to stay. Instead, they confirmed that I was doing exactly the right thing. The real Michael, the one without the mask of false devotion, was showing himself clearly for the first time. I looked at him calmly and said, "Michael, I have been alone for years, even with you living in this house. At least now I'll be alone with dignity and peace instead of alone with daily humiliation." He stormed out of the house that night, slamming the door behind him. I don't know where he went, and I didn't care. For the first time in years, I was alone in my own home without fear, without criticism, without someone monitoring my every move and decision. I spent that evening packing my most precious belongings: photo albums, books, and a few pieces of jewelry that had belonged to my mother. I felt like I was preparing for the first day of the rest of my life. Moving day was one of the most liberating experiences of my life. As the professional movers loaded my furniture and belongings into their truck, I felt like I was shedding years of oppression and fear. I was leaving behind the house where I had felt like a prisoner and heading toward a place where I could be myself again. Michael appeared briefly that morning, not to help or say goodbye, but to take the belongings he wanted from his room. We didn't speak to each other. The movers efficiently handled everything while I supervised, making sure that only my possessions were being loaded. It was businesslike and peaceful, exactly what I had hoped for. My new apartment was small but bright, with large windows that looked out over a beautifully maintained garden. For the first time in years, I could choose what to eat for breakfast, what time to go to bed, what programs to watch on television. These might seem like small freedoms, but after years of having every choice controlled, they felt monumental. The senior community turned out to be exactly what I needed. My neighbors were independent, active people who welcomed me warmly but respected my privacy. There were activities available if I wanted to participate: book clubs, gardening groups, exercise classes, but no pressure to conform to anyone else's expectations of how I should spend my time. I started going back to church regularly, reconnecting with friends who had been told I was too confused to enjoy visits. They were surprised and delighted to find me articulate, engaged, and very much myself. Several of them confessed that they had been worried about me but hadn't known how to help when Michael was controlling access to me. Most importantly, I began to trust my own judgment again. I made decisions about my daily life, my finances, my social activities, and my future plans. Each choice I made successfully rebuilt my confidence and reminded me that I was still a capable, intelligent woman who deserved respect and autonomy. About 6 months after I moved out, Michael appeared at my door. The apartment complex had security, but residents could authorize visitors, and I had mistakenly thought he was someone from building maintenance when the front desk called. When I opened the door and saw him standing there, my first instinct was fear, but I quickly realized that the balance of power had completely shifted. He looked terrible. He had clearly been struggling financially without my house and income to support him. He asked if he could move in with me again, promising that things would be different this time. I listened to everything he said, and then I told him no with a calmness that surprised us both. I explained that he had taught me that I could not trust him with my well-being, my finances, or my independence. I said that if he wanted any relationship with me, it would have to be based on mutual respect and recognition of my autonomy. I made it clear that I would never again live with him or give him any control over my life. That was 2 years ago. Michael has contacted me a few times since then, usually when he needs money or help with some crisis. Each time, I have maintained my boundaries. I will not provide financial assistance or allow him back into my daily life in any way. Today, at 68 years old, I can say with complete honesty that I am happier and more at peace than I have been in decades. I live independently in my own space, make my own decisions, and maintain relationships with people who treat me with respect and kindness. I have learned that setting boundaries is not cruel, it is necessary for self-preservation. I have discovered that it is never too late to reclaim your life, no matter how lost you might feel. Most importantly, I have proven to myself that I am still a strong, capable woman who deserves to be treated with dignity. My story proves that no matter how old you are, no matter how dependent you might feel, no matter how convinced you become that you have no choices, there is always a way to take back control of your life. The most important step is recognizing that you deserve better than what you are receiving. If you're listening to this and recognizing parts of your own story, please know that you are not alone. You are not too old, too dependent, or too confused to deserve respect and autonomy. You have more power than you realize, and you deserve to live on your own terms. Sometimes the quietest revolution is simply refusing to accept unacceptable treatment anymore. That revolution can begin today, with one small step toward reclaiming your life. Trust yourself. You know the difference between love and control, and you deserve the first while never having to accept the second. Your story matters, your choices matter, and you matter. Share your thoughts in the comments below if this story spoke to you. Let's create a community where women support each other in recognizing their own strength and worth.